O Expresso Futuro veio para Vitália, uma comunidade de pessoas que querem viver para sempre. Essa comunidade se instalou em Honduras, na ilha de Roatán, na América Central, e atraiu pesquisadores jovens e cientistas do mundo inteiro que estão pesquisando o tema de longevidade. É interessante porque ela fica em uma zona autônoma especial dentro de Honduras, que tem autonomia, inclusive legal, dentro do país. E o objetivo dessa comunidade é acelerar as pesquisas para ampliar o máximo possível a vida humana. Esse experimento pode gerar inspiração e talvez ideias para outros lugares do mundo, inclusive o Brasil, para buscar formas de inovação institucional. Vamos conhecer melhor. Dia 2 aqui na comunidade de Vitália e a gente vai agora fazer atividades esportivas. A gente vai entrar na onda aqui seguindo a dieta e a vida aqui de Vitália, então vamos fazer um pouquinho de atividade física também. Uma das coisas que eu achei interessantes é que o pessoal aqui segue o que fala. Então tem uma busca de longevidade, a gente sabe que fazer exercícios prolonga a saúde. E então tem gente que nada, inclusive nada 4 quilômetros para dentro dos atols aqui. Tem gente que faz jiu-jitsu, tem gente que joga tênis, tem gente que mergulha. Então é uma comunidade ativa. É aquela ideia de que corpo e mente estão integrados. E, obviamente, fazer atividade física ajuda em tudo, né? Combater estresse e tantas outras coisas. Nicholas, do you practice the routines yourself? Like, do you wake up with the sun and eat the Brian Johnson blueprint?
Yeah, I mean, my diet is, it's not super optimized. I do wake up very early, rising with the sun, which is like perfect here because the sun rises exactly in front of our bedrooms. I feel that's already giving me a huge kickstart. I think it's important to cover your bases, sort of diet, exercise, and sleep.
Oh yeah.
It's still good to do these things right because you'll have a healthier life.
Yeah.
But in terms of really radically extending our lifespan, we're very limited by our genetic setup. We need to have technological interventions into the body.
Yeah.
So we need to have new drugs and treatments and maybe even cybernetics and implants.
One of the things that the community proposes is that getting old and aging is a disease, right? We have to look into it as a disease, look for treatments, research. Where does this change of perspective comes from?
I mean, it comes from the science. We know, or we have decoded what's happening in our bodies that's causing aging. And we have some very specific ideas, the specific hallmarks that could stop the process. We still don't have cures for aging, right? We should never forget we're very much in the beginning. But I think the science and the technology is now ready to prove it, right? So there are some drugs that are in mice trials, right? So that are able to extend lifespan in mice by about 30%. There's scientific debates, right? So there are some people like Peter Fedichev, for example, he's saying you can rejuvenate the human body by maximum 10 years. Right, beyond that, it's physically not possible. Aubrey de Grey disagrees, and they have productive debates around it.
And how do you deal with the contrarian questions? Do you think that people should live forever? Do you think that would be a good thing?
I think people should have a choice. There's a very good philosopher, Patrick Linden, who wrote a whole book, The Case Against Death. And the simple thesis is that life is good and death is bad. And we want more of what's good. So you can really think through that question. We have an aversion to it, and people have an initial skeptical reaction to it because we need to deal with the reality. Historically, all humans that have ever existed died. And so to come to grips with the fear, one of our mechanisms is to interpret it as something inevitable and maybe even embrace it. That's why it's totally understandable that people have this reaction, right? And it's rational, right? Because you shouldn't have hope in something that's just not realistic and not possible. And the way I think we need to succeed as a movement is not by trying to convince people through words, but show them, don't tell them.
Yeah.
Right? So here are new drugs and new treatments that are safe, that are actually working. There's a much deeper conversation, right? People have other reactions, things like overpopulation, for example.
Pension funds, or how do you deal with, you know...
It's no question that our society and our institutions right now would not be adapted.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we need to change something. And almost every society in the world is on the trajectory to have declining birth rates and below replacement fertility rates.
True.
So that longevity could be a solution.
So in this future possibility, people could be young forever in a sense, right?
I'm still pro-children, by the way, and still pro-procreation.
Oh yeah, sure.
Because I think human life is great. I found that so beautiful. Like, love is great, and we'll still have problems. You know, we'll still deal with mental and spiritual challenges.
Yeah.
But it's still better to be alive than to not to be alive, because we always can have another chance.
We are living in a moment in which people are complaining of being alone, and there's like a lot of loss of faith and loss of community, and people are being atomized maybe by social networks. And what you're doing definitely brings people together, as we can see here.
I'm not against cities. I think cities are good. And at the same time, as humans, we're tribal, right? And we're used to be living in communities of, like, at most, 100 or 150 people. Like, there's a whole movement around co-living that is increasingly seeking these intentional communities.
Yeah.
And sort of going to places where they can associate themselves freely with like-minded or aligned people. And that's also not a silver bullet, right? Ask anyone in those kind of communities. It's very hard to make community work. But I think ultimately it's expanding the menu we have. Network states, intentional communities, charter cities are really the next frontier to build more options, not only for people in situations of high abundance, but increasingly also to people at the lower end. So when you think of charter cities in Africa or in Honduras here. So I think the frontier that we're opening here is very large, and we'll see hopefully a huge range of diversity in terms of size and scale of how these communities look like and how people live together, the governance mechanisms they use.
É interessante porque o projeto aqui, ele trata de várias coisas sobre as quais a gente tem dúvidas. Então, por exemplo, implante de chip, terapias genéticas, uso de dados para medir tudo que acontece no seu corpo. Essas são tecnologias novas. Sobre isso, eu acho que a gente tem dúvidas. Mas tem uma parte do projeto aqui que eu acho que dá para a gente ter certezas. E essa parte é a parte de ter um estilo de vida mais saudável. Agora, é importante a gente lembrar que esse hábito saudável, ter isso no mundo de hoje é muito difícil. Não é uma coisa fácil, né? Porque a gente tem uma questão de dinheiro. Você ter um estilo de vida como esse não é barato. A gente sabe que hoje é mais barato você comer comida industrializada do que comer comida natural. Então, é difícil. Esse estilo de vida simplesmente pode ser inacessível, pode ser impossível de ser alcançado, né? Então, isso também dificulta a construção de um hábito saudável. Uma das práticas de longevidade que o pessoal faz aqui é banho em água abaixo de zero, tá? Eles colocam sal na água para baixar a temperatura ainda mais. E tem esse freezer aqui. Eles até tentaram antes fazer com uns negocinhos ali, de colocar gelo, etc. Mas aí eles foram direto ao ponto, botaram um freezer aqui. E saúde é uma só. Então, saúde, você tem a saúde do corpo, a saúde da mente. E é uma única coisa. Corpo e mente é igual, não tem uma separação entre um e outro.
immediately it's like, especially when you've never done one, it's a shock, like to your whole nervous system. You feel like you can't breathe, you're like, like gasping for breath. And by deeply breathing, that allows you to kind of get back to a more relaxed state of mind. Then you actually find a state of peace and calm.
Não é uma coisa que eu queria fazer, mas o nome aqui do Expresso Futuro, falando de longevidade, eu vou tomar um banho e entrar aqui nessa água gelada, tá? O pessoal da produção tá rindo aqui de mim. Bom, vamos lá. Banho de água abaixo de zero. Aff, Maria! Pelo amor de Deus! Em nome da longevidade, é isso aí. Valeu, pessoal! Obrigado!
So I've been traveling around the world, kind of going to different co-living spaces, communities, ones that are super like yogic and regenerative co-living farms, you know, permaculture, but also like Vitalia, like the focus on biotech and longevity and really just extending human health span. It's a pretty mind-blowing concept. I still have reservations about that and making sure that you live with purpose and that you live to serve others and the planet and the people in the communities as well, not just for yourself. But I also do think that the scientists are going to keep building this no matter what, and they are convicted and they are like hustling, and that is just a beautiful thing to witness. I think that's kind of that duality that is really hard to do, like the ultra scientific mind, but also the really spiritual, like open, creative, artistic mind. Like that's art and science seem to go at ends, but I actually don't believe they are. It's like a false dichotomy. They can be stacked on top of each other, where you can appreciate both the art and science of the planet that we live in. And so when I see a DNA strand, that to me is art, not just science. When I see like how beautiful like our ecology and biology is, that's obviously, you know, the science of ecology, but it's also just like a movie unfolding in front of my eyes, like an art piece.
Me llamo Luis Vázquez, vengo del sur de Honduras, pero otro de mi trabajo era hacer un mural. Soy sincero, al inicio no sabía nada de Vitalia, ni de muchos temas que se hablaban aquí, entonces luego empecé a investigar un poco sobre Vitalia y veía que hablaba sobre longevidad, sobre biotech, biohacking. Dentro de la misma investigación pude descubrir que el arte es una de las cosas que ayuda a que tengamos más longevidad o más vida. Y uno de los motivos principales es por la salud mental o por la salud espiritual. Y ya que el arte es un medio de expresión para poder sacar esos problemas internos, esos sentimientos que tenemos reprimidos, esas emociones que muchas veces no las podemos explicar con palabras, sino a través de colores, de formas. El tema de biotech, biohacking, cripto, Startup City estaba en cero, no sabía nada. Entonces comencé a ir al laboratorio, a escuchar lo que hablaba Caso, las otras personas, a preguntar a las personas sobre cripto, ir a las conferencias. Luego elaboré un mural, vemos a un científico con un microscopio investigando, luego una mano que tiene el tema de biohacking, el tema de la mejora humana. Podemos ver en una parte del mural un segmento del ADN y cómo se va transformando en vida. El último segmento en el que estoy trabajando ahorita habla sobre las Startup Cities, sobre la idea de Vitália, de ser una ciudad donde la opción de la muerte es una opción que va a desaparecer y que podemos aspirar a una mejor vida.
Uma das razões que essa ilha está sendo muito procurada é porque é muito bonita. Então tem lugar aqui que é de mergulho, que é muito bom, tem um uns atolls que são gigantescos. Pelo que eu li, é o segundo maior atol do mundo. Então tem muita vida marinha aqui. Além de tudo, é próximo dos Estados Unidos, então tem muito turismo, né, que vem de lá. E isso, obviamente, traz dinheiro, traz desenvolvimento. Até a escola montessoriana tem aqui. So, Zelda, how did you get here?
I am an idealistic person, so I want to contribute to build a better world. And the work that I am doing is related to education and building new models for educating young people and giving more freedom to young people to actually decide what they want to learn and how they want to learn.
You basically dropped out from high school, right? Why did you do it and how did you build a different way?
To me, being seated in a classroom all day long, learning things that I'm not that interested in, taught by teachers who themselves aren't that passionate in what they're, teaching, it was a waste of time. I knew that my time was more valuable in, a company that's trying to solve interesting problems in education or in a non-profit. When I decided to drop out, all my teachers told me, Zelda, you're going to fail. And that makes sense because most people who decide to drop out, unfortunately, they don't have the right resources to find an alternative path in which they can be successful. But in my case, within the 2 years after dropping out, I found jobs in tech companies, very amazing tech companies. I became the leader of a program for young entrepreneurs under 23 who want to learn to build their own startups. I became a published author at 18 years old, publishing Hack Your Education, a guide for teenagers so that they can focus on what really matters, in my opinion, which is what are you interested in? What do you want to pursue? What is your purpose in this world? What problems do you want to solve?
In Brazil, one of the problems we have, I think it's everywhere now, it's people giving up on school. We call it evasion, so people basically drop out because they don't find the schools interesting or anything like that. So how do you reinvent school?
That's a wonderful question to answer while being in Prospera. Because Prospera is a playground to think as radically as we want about a new system for young people to educate themselves. I want to think completely differently about how do we relate to young people? What is the place of young people in our society? Climate change is becoming more and more a reality as artificial intelligence is coming to us closer and closer. The problems are getting more and more complex. And yet, as you said, school isn't changing. So for me, it's not about making a new school, it's about asking those questions. What do we need? And also, what do we want the world to look like? We've built, since the Industrial Revolution, a world of specialists. Everyone has its own little field, and we're not really allowed to, get out of the beaten path and try other things. But I really believe in polymathy. I believe that those complex problems that we need to solve, we will find the solutions for them out of building bridges between fields. It's important for people not to have a straight out answer and also ask themselves, use their own creativity to say, what would it look like for me, for my needs, a kind of education that answer the needs of me personally, but also my community. Because what is for sure is that the next education system that we need to invent is not a one-size-fits-all. The answer is actually multiple.
One thing that I find amazing here at Vitália and Prospera is the sense of community, right? I feel that now people are feeling lonely. There's this issue of mental health. Technology increases that problem. And I think people are looking for different forms of community.
When I arrived my first day at Vitalia, I felt like I was entering in a university, except I wasn't given a schedule, I wasn't given, classes that were mandatory for me to follow. I was free to talk to whoever I wanted in the room, ask them questions, and let their curiosity fill in the conversation as we were getting along, as we were getting to know each other. Gen Z, the generation that I am part of, since COVID-19 is experiencing a huge crisis of loneliness. To me, Vitalia is the meeting of these two challenges that are huge challenges that we need to solve as a society, right? We need to find ways to build new communities, and we need to find ways to educate people for the real world, for the real problems out there.
So when do we get your book translated into Portuguese? Come on.
I will work on that,
okay,
yes.
Let's help. Sempre que a gente vê uma coisa nova, e na vida eu acompanho tecnologia há muito tempo, então eu já vi coisas novas surgirem e as pessoas duvidarem totalmente delas, né? Até elas meio que se consolidarem. Um exemplo mesmo é Bitcoin. Quando eu vi a primeira vez, estava na Universidade de Princeton e era 2010 ainda. E quando eu voltei ao Brasil, falei disso, as pessoas davam risada, né? Achavam piada. Olha só, Bitcoin, essa moeda virtual hoje vale $4, né? Neste dia de hoje, o Bitcoin vale $67 mil uma moeda. Então, naquela época, era piada, era uma coisa assim, isso aqui não vai dar em nada e tal. E hoje você tem grandes fundos de investimento investindo nisso por meio de ETFs e outros instrumentos e muito dinheiro entrando nesse mercado. Então, quando a gente olha, né, a estrutura de Próspera, Vitália, a gente, claro que se pergunta se tem futuro, né? Se vai dar certo, o que vai acontecer. E eu acho que essa pergunta é legítima. So, Anton, what is your background?
So my education was in international economics and management. But I studied and lived in Ukraine, but at some point I realized that we have to solve aging and that things are not going as fast as I want to, and the best thing to do it is to do it yourself. Now I am doing bioinformatics of aging and also large language models.
Amazing. So it's the convergence between longevity and AI, we can say like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still doing both. Aging is not like a narrow field. It depends on solving aging depends on the progress of a lot of adjacent fields. And one of the things that you can use to speed it up is to give researchers open tools that improve their productivity. And one of the projects I'm working on is Longevity Genie, is AI, open source AI assistant for aging research that knows biological data sets and papers. Wow. What I believe is what really missing in biotech is open ways to go forward, because most of the cases you have too many like proprietary closed source solution. Yeah. We need some open platform to move further, where everybody can contribute, because it's solving aging that is important, not just making some money.
And you think that open source, which I really like, is helpful for longevity research, economics?
Yes, I believe that's what is needed. There is some power that we can unleash if we go open source. Also, it doesn't diminish commercial usage. For example, in our case, we have open core, and then we can make some commercial solutions on top of something that is open. So that's why we participate in Vitalia startup accelerator. And we've seen like how things can go really fast when Facebook open sourced its Llama large language model. Like a huge amount of interesting developments appeared, because people have all over, like there's a huge potential, huge many ideas all over the world, including LATAM, that people can contribute if they can just play with it. And if you keep it closed, you may not even notice what is possible biased by your company strategy.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm a big enthusiast of the open source AI models as well. Anton, congrats on the great work.
Thank you.
And should we take a little bit of swimming now?
Yeah, I think it's pretty good for longevity.
I agree. Let's make it happen then. Okay. Estar aqui me fez pensar em várias coisas. Uma das coisas que eu pensei é que é muito difícil ser jovem hoje. E eu vejo essa dificuldade no rosto de cada uma das pessoas aqui. Você está sob pressões enormes, você tem um mundo em que a tecnologia ela nos isola, ela nos faz sentir cada vez mais sozinhos. As taxas de solidão nunca foram tão altas. Então, eu acho que muita gente hoje, essas pessoas perdem, né, o sentido. E elas vão buscar reinventar a ideia de comunidade.
So this is like a very small scale experiment that if we succeed, it's a proof that we can do things differently in terms of education, governance, medicine, science, so many different fields, if not all fields, all areas that make a society what it is.
Siento que es una oportunidad para replicar este tipo de experiencias en otros espacios donde también las personas de las comunidades puedan tener acceso a este conocimiento, y creo que este nuevo tipo de comunidades, de emprendimientos, son muy importantes para desarrollar los países, para compartir y crecer de una manera colectiva.
There probably is no other time than this time on Earth where network states and startup cities can form. Kind of like the Manhattan Project was for the nuclear bomb, but this is for like life and health and love. It's like a mega trend, you can say, like the next stage in civilization, perhaps, from the nation state to like the network state.
Eu acho que Vitália, e isso que está acontecendo aqui, é um experimento que atrai as pessoas que não se encaixaram em outros lugares. Essas pessoas são responsáveis por boa parte das inovações que a gente vive hoje. Você ser um misfit, né, uma pessoa que não se encaixou em lugar nenhum, ao construir algo como Vitália, isso dá um sentido para a vida das pessoas. Elas podem estar vindo aqui com histórias pessoais, às vezes, muito difíceis, de família, de país, geopolítica e assim por diante. E aqui elas encontram uma comunidade de pessoas que são também interessadas por conhecimento, por ciência e por terem esse objetivo, né, de longevidade.